Greetings. My name is McCallum Garneau, and I am a current senior at the University of Wyoming. Throughout my courses in the Honors College, I learned a lot of interesting things, and through those core classes, my interest sparked in the study of the Inuit tribes of the Arctic. They were always an interesting culture that, despite their peaceful behaviors and amazing ideas on living with nature, they have suffered under global issues more than any other group of indigenous people. For my honors capstone, I decided to study them and how the relationship with their environment is harming them due to the global issue with toxins that specifically target them due to their location. Before I get started on that, a little bit about me and my background. As I mentioned before, I am a current senior at the University of Wyoming who is looking to graduate this spring with a Bachelor's of Physiology. I also have plans of attending optometry school at NSU in Florida this fall. I decided to pursue studies for the Inuit for my capstone, and specifically in regard to their eye health, as that correlates with personal interest of the eyes and the personal interest of the Inuit. Being able to study in both of those areas gave me a lot of insight into what I could possibly see in my own career in the future. The main problem that got me in the study was the idea of bioaccumulation and how toxins are being involved and how it's harming the Inuit people. Bioaccumulation is the idea of a substance being consumed by smaller animals, which is then consumed by bigger animals up the food chain. This causes the toxin amount to increase exponentially with each step up the chain until you get to the higher range with dangerous amounts of toxins in each animal's body. The transnational flow of toxins causes toxins from all over the world that are dumped into the ocean to flow up into the Arctic and accumulate. Combine this with the idea that there are very high amounts of toxin like methylmercury, PCBs, and lead in the Arctic of the animals in the Arctic, with incredibly high amounts of animals at the top of the food chain, which is examples of seals, bears, and larger fish. You have a real big problem for the Inuit that needs to be solved. They are consumed by Inuit, and through this, high toxin amounts are seen in the Inuit that are too high for their health. I sought to look at the impact that was having on the Inuit's ability to see and how these toxins affected vision, and if possible, how to fix the problem and diminish ocular health in Inuit communities. In looking through the study, the idea of how these chemicals damage vision was only clear if the general idea of how vision works was discussed beforehand. The basic anatomy of the eye consists of an external and internal portion. The external includes the iris, lens, cornea, and pupil. The insides consist of the sclera, choroid, retina, macula lutea, fovea, and optic nerve. All of these structures are used to focus and bend light onto surfaces that convert that light into neural signals to then travel to the brain to be perceived as conscious vision. The neural pathway that carries this signal is known as the primary visual pathway, and it transmits conscious visual signals for perception in the V1 part of the brain. Damage to these structures and that pathway in particular can be done through three major ways: genetic factors, environmental factors, and behavioral factors. Genetic factors include higher prevalence to glaucoma, malformations of the eye, atrophy of the optic nerve, and retinitis pigmentosa. All these factors diminish ocular health. Environmental factors include pollutants, including toxins in the food, chemicals in the air, direct ocular exposure to UV radiation, and other substances used in the body that can damage the different structures of the eye. Behaviors like not protecting eyes from environmental factors, overuse of the eyes, and lack of proper health care for the eye can cause damage to it. These factors are looked at very seriously when studying Inuit, and their vision may be different. Well, more like why their vision might be different. Going back to healthcare, the Inuit have a limited amount of eye care clinics that they can use to improve their ocular conditions, with only 6 hospitals and 3 eye care centers in the entire Nunavik area that can be used by the people. Compare this to the 58 hospitals that the Alaskan and Canadian people have all over the world, and there's a disadvantage in their ability to get proper eye care. For the methodology of the research, all the research articles that were used had techniques in their experiments that gave unique answers, allowing for a better understanding of the specific situation that each test revolved around. All Inuit-based tests use survey-based studies when asking for eye illnesses and the frequency of which the person taking the survey went to the eye clinic to get their eyes checked. A general structure of each test involved measuring the toxin amount in the tester's body and the score that the tester achieved, which was then compared and contrasted to other testers to look for correlations regarding the differences in how the tests were scored and how that correlated to how much toxins were inside each individual body. This included both quantitative and qualitative data. In the end, all the studies used different designs that showed the impact of toxins on animal health and eye function. But the research done outside the Inuit circle, there were several animal studies that demonstrated the toxic effect of the ocular health of animals in studies from America and Japan that saw ocular health degeneration due to high toxin exposure. Zebrafish larvae were exposed to methylmercury and synchron X-rays in one test, and the result was a degeneration of the central nervous system and the initial discovery that the methylmercury accumulated in the retinal photoreceptors of the zebrafish. Another study looked at rhesus monkeys and how the level of lead in their blood affected their visual development over 18 months. Certain monkeys were elevated up to 55 micrograms per 100 milliliters of lead in their blood, and others went up to higher to over 85 micrograms per 100 milliliters of lead in the blood. The lower quantity tests scored much worse in their scoptic visual function, meaning their ability to see in the dark, when compared to regular monkeys. The higher group was practically night blind, showing a correlation between lead poisoning and the degeneration of the visual function. Polar bears in the Arctic have shown to have general health problems as well as in their eyes and their genitalia. Certain issues of reproduction have been noticed, and development of the actual reproductive organs was also noticed in polar bears, and their ability to see and hunt prey was seen to be diminished when in the Arctic in particular, due to the high amount of toxins that are up there. A study in America looked at a 36-year-old man with failing visual acuity. The medical study of his body found high amounts of methylmercury in other patients that came in previously with the same amount of level saw their level acuities drop as well, visual acuities drop as well. Color vision was heavily impaired by the methylmercury as well. A study in Japan over PCB exposure on Kawaishu Island found that over several years of contamination from eating toxic fish caused the locals to begin to have neural issues, including constriction of the visual field and other disturbances neurologically. All of these toxins cause many problems with animals and non-Inuit people. It would make sense if high toxic levels correlate with bad optical health in the Inuit as well. For the Nunavik Inuit communities themselves, there were 4 studies that looked at how Inuit and their exposure to toxins, either personally or in utero, performed in different tasks. The first test looked at the toxin content in Inuit blood in comparison to the rest of the world. Pregnant Inuit women were tested with the majority having much more methylmercury and PCBs in their blood that then were considered healthy. In fact, I believe it was over 56% of them had a higher amount than healthy. 17% of the children tested during the experiment also had far too high of levels of toxins like PCB to be considered healthy, showing that there was much more exposure to the toxins by the Inuit and Nunavik than around the world. The second study looked at 94 infants, Inuit infants, and tested their ability to recognize visual stimuli from 6.5 months to 11 months of age, while measuring the individual's toxin amount in each infant's blood. Children with higher PCB quantity in blood scored far worse in remembering an object that they saw only a short time before they were tested for recognition. This showed the idea that visual recognition was impacted by PCB toxins being very high in the blood and causing damage to the neurological system. The third study looked at 196 Inuit children around 11 years of age. The test that was given used hierarchical regressional analysis to study how the quantity of toxins in the blood correlated with the go and no-go test that was given to them. This test basically gave different letters on the screen, and the child was supposed to press a button for all the letters except the X. The accuracy score was calculated on the children with high lead concentrations in their blood performed much worse on the test, which not only tested cognitive functioning, but also visual recognition. The final test at 102 used 102 preschool children in Nunavik, and they were tested for toxin content in their blood, and as well as nutrients like omega-3 fatty acids, as well as other vitamins. They were then subjected to standard eye tests, and the results found the high content of all 3, methylmercury, lead, and PCBs, correlated with lower test scores regardless of nutrition and vitamin content. In all 4 tests, the toxin showed that the correlation between was with decreased eye ability. The correlation is really strong, and this goes along with the other 2 survey tests conducted. The first was a self-report on visual impairments that the surveyors suffered from. This was asked for all native Arctic natives, and the result found that higher amounts of visual impairments in the adult population of the Inuit, whether it came to cataracts, glaucoma, or diabetic eye issues, they were all much higher than their Canadian counterparts. The same Inuit study group also admitted to far fewer visual exams per year than recommended, and many diabetics only went once a year instead of twice a year as recommended by healthcare professionals. The second survey gathered around 14 data from around 14 village of Nunavik in regard to eye issues that was generally seen. High amounts of the 6,341 Inuit that were studied had eye conditions like myopia, hyperopia, astigmatism, presbyopia, and anismetropia. Over three-quarters of the patients who went to the clinic were prescribed eyeglasses, and yet very few got them. And the general high amounts of eye issues and the small amount of utilization of the medical treatment puts the Inuits in a really bad spot and kind of limiting them from living their life to the fullest. The solutions for these people are pretty straightforward, and the solutions are, if the solutions are executed correctly, the Inuit can benefit from the results. The toxins are the main issue, and the way of getting into the Inuit is through their diet. The way that the toxins are actually getting into the Inuit is through their diet. If a reduction of the traditional diet with high toxin content and the inclusion of imported healthier foods were introduced, there would be much less toxins in the Inuit to begin with. Though many of the Inuit don't want to stop their diet, including other foods, is a good idea, especially for pregnant mothers where toxins can have a strong negative effect on the fetus. At the end of the day, it is a personal choice, but it should be kind of given to them, at least in informational format, that it would be more healthy for them if they stayed away from large Arctic animals like polar bears and seals and other things that they generally have, because these have been shown to have a lot more toxins in them. More important foods can also increase nutrition that might not have been there before. More access to healthcare with local doctors would make the Inuit much more likely to access that system to get their eye problems treated. Having more local doctors gives the Inuit a sense of their own independent culture, and it makes them much more likely to include these healthcare systems as part of their normal life, and as well as implementing them into their culture. A global effort needs to be made to reduce the pollution of these toxins into the oceans so that they are not as high to begin in the first place. There's already been several policies put forward by the EU and America in regards to reducing PCBs over the years, and it seemed to have had a positive effect. There is less PCBs now than there were 20 years ago, but there needs to be more done on over all these toxins to make sure that these Inuit aren't getting exposed to these chemicals through the traditional diet. Hopefully, with time and the reduction of these chemicals, they can hopefully begin eating their traditional diet again, as they will not be as toxin rich. The future of this problem includes more research, and it includes what other indigenous people suffer from. Are they suffering from the same thing as the Inuit are? The Inuit are just a small part of the indigenous peoples that live up there. Studying them as well could give a better idea of what's going on overall. Though the research put together is fairly conclusive, much more research needs to be done on what other aspects could be causing Inuit to perform more poorly than their European counterparts in visual tests. Obviously, toxins are a proposed factor, but other environmental, genetic, and behavioral factors can come into play. Weeding these factors out in future research could solidify the cause and the effect of the toxins with the Inuit optic health. Lastly, the work over this issue is never done. As the Arctic continues to be berated with global climate change and high amounts of toxins, there's going to be more issues that the Inuit are going to encounter. Constant vigilance and willingness to help will really improve the lives of these indigenous people and their culture. And with that, I hope to hear some questions soon from those who are reading the presentation. Until then, thank you for listening, and I look forward to hearing to your responses.